Blessings, family. Welcome back. Today, I want to speak to you about the recently issued executive order from President Biden. It's the White House's initiative on educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for Black Americans. I'm going to touch on a few points from the executive order. I'm going to speak to a few of these issues and how it is virtually impossible for him to carry out anything that's in it. The document actually is nothing but claptrap. Additionally, I'm going to speak to a few points historically whereby the dominant class has attempted to educate us. I'm going to speak to points with regards to that education and how it relates to us today. And in closing, I'm going to discuss or touch on a few objectives of what a wholesome education and African-centered education should look like for Black people here in America. As you know, politicians are panderers. Don't be confused by the tricky terms that's in this document. We should have learned a lesson from George Orwell's 1984, whereby it speaks of double talk and double speak as being a language to confuse the masses, to keep them off balance politically, socially, and consciously. Be sure to read this document for yourselves. I say this because there is a lot in the document, and I'm only going to speak to a few points from the executive order as it is. The executive order states that many barriers that Black people face in the United States are indeed historic in nature. Moreover, it goes on to say that because of persistent racial and systemic injustices, Black people have not been able to reach their full potential as citizens in this nation, and I will go as far as to say as human beings. Additionally, it also mentions that many of the racial problems that exist are not only in the field of academia, but it's prevalent in the workplace, in our daily lives, in society, everywhere we may go. And this is because, unfortunately, white supremacy is ubiquitous in American culture. It is the foundation of American life. It is embedded in every pillar of society. You can find white supremacy and injustice in religion, education, politics, and economics, which I would consider the four pillars of society. In order for us to really grasp what this means with regards to educational inequality in this country, we must take a look at some of the objectives I see as an educator of 20 years in this country. The modern education system supports European global hegemony with words like multiculturalism, diversity, and globalization. It promotes patriotism. Additionally, the main objective is to produce workers for the corporate sector, to reduce our children to the same safe level, to quell dissent, to make them patriotic, to make them obedient to authority. This is the purpose of the modern education system. It doesn't teach our children how to think. Instead, it teaches them what to think. Most of all, it serves to promote and perpetuate the interests of the dominant race, class, and gender. However, Biden's intent, according to the executive order, is to extend or promote equity in the schools across the nation, which will ensure economic opportunity for Black Americans across the nation. I find this curious. I mean, when you look at history, you'll notice that since our ancestors were brought here, the dominant class, race, gender, has been attempting to educate or miseducate us. On the plantations, our ancestors weren't given the right to be educated. They couldn't read. And at the cost of their lives, if they attempted to do so, they could be punished severely. They could lose a limb and even lose their lives. I find this interesting. An executive order with regards to educational equity. What exactly is educational equity? And going back in history, not too long after the Emancipation Proclamation, there was a conference held in New York, June 1890, called the Mohawk Conference on the Negro Question. This conference was convened by members of the upper echelons of society from the arena of politics, education, and religious ministries. They figured that Black people just recently freed from the plantation was a grave threat to the American way of life, and that if these people weren't saved with a good Christian education, that they would become menaces and it will bring the country down to its knees. So this conference was chaired by former President Rutherford B. Hayes. They convened for 3 days in June 1890. The decision which resulted from the convention was that it would be best if we were educated properly, and that education should result in producing of us teachers and preachers. Interestingly, not too long after that, Dr. Carter G. Woodson published his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, in 1933. He did so because he felt African people were being culturally indoctrinated and miseducated instead of being educated. These are serious moments in history that reverberate to this very day. So it seems Dr. Carter G. Woodson was prophetic with his work, The Miseducation of the Negro. Unfortunately, we as black people in this country are still being miseducated today, 2021. Hence, even President Biden took notice of our gross miseducation in this nation. Apparently, there are problems on the horizon with regards to educating us and our futures in this nation. I find it curious with regards to President Biden. Here's a person who, when he was a senator, he co-authored the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1991. This act caused a major spike in mass incarcerations for black and Latino people across the nation, in addition to the rise of the prison industrial complex. Not too long after that, in early 2000, he also authored the Patriot Act. This too was harmful to not only black people, but American citizens. It rolled back civil liberties and circumvented the Constitution. President Biden now issuing an executive order for educational equity, but at the same time, the effects and the impact of mass incarceration of black lives, which is destroying our families across the nation. They don't go together. How can he address the issue of educational inequity and at the same time black people are being incarcerated on a massive scale? Our families are being destroyed. How can one go without the other? In order for him to address these issues, if he is sincere, he must dismantle the entire system. If Biden truly want to address these problems, there is no way around it. The executive order itself said that the problems and impediments and the systemic racism that black people face, which prevents us from growing or advancing our interests, are historic in nature. As I said in the beginning of this video, they are embedded in every aspect of life in this country. So, in order for him to truly address this, he has to reconfigure the nation. He has to dismantle it on a major scale. I personally don't think that's going to be done. Additionally, this is an executive order. This is not a permanent fixture of government policy. This could be changed and rescinded with the next president or any successive administrations. We must be clear on this. Therefore, once again, I question his motives behind this executive order. And I also must revisit something Malcolm X said about the white liberal. Malcolm X said that the white liberal is the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere because he pretends as if he really wants to help. But behind the scenes, he has an agenda for his own benefit and not the benefit of the subjugated or those he's pretending or attempting to help. Think about it. Biden appeared on the Breakfast Club and made the remark that if any of us, black people particularly, had difficulty in making the decision to choose between him and Trump, then we aren't black. Therefore, again, I ask, and I would like you to question, what is his motive? Understand, this executive order means nothing. I say this because what it sets out to do can't be done and won't be done by this administration or any other administration that comes to office. Our education has to serve our needs. There is no way around this. We must take control of our education. We must not depend on any other group of people to educate our children but ourselves. Keep in mind that education is culturally biased. If you go to China, the Chinese educate their people to serve Chinese interests. The same in Japan, the same in Arab nations. They educate their own to serve their best interests. We must do the same. Our education should reflect who we are and what we need as a people collectively. We must produce a cadre of workers, thinkers, doers, artists, activists, intent on changing our condition and reality. Our education must speak to our needs. It must be about the business of restoring balance and harmony with us as a people. It should change our self-image as a people worldwide. Most importantly, any education that we have should speak and give resolutions to the problems that we are faced with as a people. If education isn't doing that, it isn't education. Read the executive order. Not only that, read Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Check out a book by John Taylor Gatto. He has a book called Weapons of Mass Instruction. He's an award-winning educator, and he talks about the problems with the modern education system of this nation. You want to always arm yourself with the information. You want to include these books in your library. It will give you a greater understanding of what is happening around us in the world today, particularly with the education system. Thank you, and I hope to see you again for the next video. Peace and blessings.